Hello guys, welcome to another video on the channel. And today I brought in Ben from Astro to have a conversation about Astro. And this should be a very exciting conversation with Ben. Hi Ben.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for bringing me on.
Yeah, cool. So quickly, I think you really don't need much introduction, but let's just give us a quick introduction of yourself and what you've been up to on the web development space.
Yeah, totally. I probably still deserve an introduction, but I'm glad you know my stuff. I know some people are watching. But to
Yeah.
introduce myself, I'm a core maintainer over at Astro, which is both a company and an open source framework that you can download to go build content driven websites. So I know a lot of you out there are probably using React or other tools like that. Astro's a drop-in tool to help you build your marketing sites, your docs, your blogs, anything content driven, and do it with the minimal JavaScript, the minimal setup required. And you can bring all the tools that you love to use, like React. So my goal is to build all the APIs that make Astro even easier to use. That's what I work on most of the time. And then outside of work, I also have a social media channel. So I do a lot of videos, one every week or 2 weeks, just
Yeah.
highlighting important features in web dev on my whiteboard. I see you nodding. You know about the whiteboard.
Yeah, yeah, I
I
do.
don't go anywhere without it, except this interview. I don't have a whiteboard right now. I feel naked,
All
but
right.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. All right. Cool. 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 That's a very cool introduction. So cool. Let's just quickly jump right into it and talk about Astro. So first off, for people that are not familiarized with Astro, what Astro is and what Astro is trying to do on the web, can you just give us an introduction of Astro and the main purpose of what Astro is trying to do here?
Yeah, I went into product pitch mode already, but I can
Yeah.
recap. It's the
Definitely.
content framework. And
Okay.
every developer usually starts with their blog, with their portfolio, with some way to put their presence online and to showcase their skills as a web developer. And that's why I love Astro so much. It's so easy to pick it up, to spin up a portfolio for the first time. We have a portfolio template just for that on astro.new. That's where all of our templates live. And
Yeah.
we also have a documentation framework since we saw a lot of people apply Astro to build Git based documentation. By Git based, I mean files on your computer. You have Markdown, you have MDX, and you want all of that to build automatically. You want to have syntax highlighting for code snippets. You want components for tab views and other interactions that you don't want to hand roll yourself since there's a lot of accessibility guidelines. So we
Mm-hmm.
waited for people to apply Astro to docs, took everything we learned and built a framework around that, which is called Starlight. So there's a lot of use cases for Astro. You can technically use it for anything, but we've noticed the things that really resonate with people are building those landing pages, that presence on the internet, and also building more focused content sites like documentation or blogs.
All right, all right, cool, cool. Okay, so let's just quickly jump right into island architecture, and I think that's really been one of the very very standout feature of Astro, right? And can you just give us a quick understanding of what the island architecture is, and like yeah,
Yeah, that's what Astro was known for day one because it
yeah,
is a very, it's a kitschy name, but it's really simple in principle. So the default in Astro, whenever you're building a site, is you can use a JSX template to just write HTML onto the page. There's no React, there's no
yeah,
JavaScript, there's no use state hook. You're just using some templating with modern components, modern syntax to ship some static HTML and CSS to the computer. And somewhere inside of that HTML, you might want to add a little bit of interactivity. For example, a like button on a blog post. Very simple example. If you wanted to make that clickable, you might add a little island for just that element on the page and say, this is going to be a React
mm-hmm.
component. The rest can be super lightweight, just HTML and Tailwind, whatever I'm using. And then for this like button, I can run astro add react in my terminal, and that will add React as an island framework that I can use in my project. You can also run astro add view Astro adds Svelte, Astro adds Solid, whatever framework you want to use. And that lets you use whatever framework you want to add that little interactive element. So that like button suddenly becomes this little area that hydrates, that mounts a little React component, and you can call use state, do whatever you want to do. You can pass props from the server into that island, and you can compose your entire page in this way. So you can imagine you can get very complex with it and nest islands inside of other islands, or you can go very
Yeah.
static and just use islands for a couple parts of the page.
All right. All right. Amazing. Amazing. So for example, right, for me, I have more of a Next.js background, right?
Totally.
I started out with React.js before I picked up Next.js as the meta framework, right, on React. So so in a scenario where I'm not familiarized with Astro, right, or I'm just new to I'm new to the ecosystem and trying to use Astro to build out my web applications, right? So what exactly is the roadmap? Because like you said, it's it's trying to solve a problem, right? So what exactly is the roadmap for me to try to learn Astro and also try to become very proficient in it, because you need to understand what's happening before you could like build our product, right? So like what is the learning approach to make use of Astro while developing?
Yeah, totally. And we get I feel like most people who try Astro have used some framework in the past. And the common ones are
Mm-hmm.
Next.js and Gatsby. Gatsby was like the king of content sites with React. Next.js is
Yeah.
it's just huge. It's huge. Everyone's using that. So first
Yeah.
off, I'm happy to say we learned a lot of patterns from Next.js. If you've used the pages router in Next, we have
Yeah.
pretty much the same conventions. It's the same pages router, same file name to create a route, and also the same get static paths function to generate a whole bunch of routes
Okay.
from a data source. All of that is taken from Next. And if you want to learn the one-to-one of all the concepts you're bringing, we actually have a migrate to Astro page on the Astro docs. So if you just Google Astro docs, you'll end up on the homepage and you'll see a button that says migrate to Astro. You can go there and that will tell you, well, we have specific guides for every framework that you might be coming from, including
Am-
Next.js. So if you just click into that,
Amazing.
it will tell you everything you would need to know learning Astro for the first time.
All right. All right. Cool. So now, for Astro, you've mentioned different framework. For example, you've mentioned Next.js, Gatsby, and also Next, Nox. I think now the question I really want to ask right now is, do I really need to make use of these different meta frameworks, right? Or do I need to okay, let me rephrase the question, right? So what I'm trying to talk about is where in Astro, right, you could make use of React JS, you could make use of Solid, right? um inside the one code base, right, that is basically Astro, then you could just import these components. Since they are all driven, you could just import them all into your Astro component or your Astro file. Like, is there any will I call it performance issue, or is there any drawback to that? Because, like you said, you could use different frameworks, Next.js, not Next.js actually, React.js, Solid, all in the same code base. Is there any drawback to using that with Astro?
So you mean using multiple different frameworks in the same project?
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, it depends on how you compose the website. Since Astro doesn't have a routing convention that wraps everything, you don't have to worry about, oh, if I import solid, all of a sudden I have this solid.js runtime that's on every
Mm-hmm.
page of my website. Not
Okay.
really the case. Every page is a new HTML document. So you might have a solid dashboard. You might build an entire admin panel using a bunch of solid.js components. And when you visit all the routes of the admin panel, it will load up some solid components. But then when you go to your homepage, you might be using a specific React carousel library for that. And over there, it's not loading solid anymore. You're not on the same HTML document. You're over here, you're using React. Now you're just using React on that page. So even though you have multiple frameworks, you're not paying a bundle cost to use like every framework all at once. It depends on Like if you add a React component, a Vue component, solid component on the same page, now you're getting a
Mm-hmm.
little bit awkward, and you're also
Yeah.
mixing a lot of different conventions, which can be overhead for certain teams. There's ways to
Correct.
mitigate it if it's necessary. Astro does have hooks to, well, not hooks, directives that let you
Directives. Yeah.
decide when a component loads. Like you can decide only load React when the carousel is visible on the page. So it doesn't load React when they visit the page for the first time, which means it loads
Okay.
very quickly if you're coming from Google. But as they scroll down to learn more about the product, that's when it boots up some JavaScript to show you a more interactive page. So you can mitigate by choosing when the JavaScript loads, but it's up to you to compose everything in a smart way.
All right. All right. Cool. So, during the previous question, I think you just mentioned directives, right? So, if I remember correctly, when I tried out Astro, I think that was a year ago, 2 years ago. Um, I had this issue where, for example, JavaScript wasn't loading, like you said, it wasn't loading on the page, and I had to debug for a while
Mm,
until I realized there was a directive I was missing. When I went back to the
classic.
docs, yeah, when I went back to the docs, I realized I wasn't making use of the right directive, and when I was able to like hack that and figure that, I think Astro became very clear to me. I was like, oh, okay, so I need to pass down the client's directive to my component before my JavaScript run, right? So like now the question mostly about directive is like how many directives are currently in Astro? Like, can you just give us like a brief number of directive and the ones that are mostly important when building out your web applications?
Yeah, and those directives, client directives, I think we call them in the docs. Those have been around since day one, and
Hmm.
that was like the claim to fame because I think there are 5 directives and also an option to invent your own. I made
Wow.
one website that says only mount this component when it's raining in New York City, and it calls an
Wow.
API to make sure it's raining, and then it tells you it's like those websites that say has this happened yet.com, and it loads.
Oh,
So you can go crazy. There's probably tens of people that have ever found a use case for that sort of thing, but it was simple enough that we just opened the API to users. If you want to
cool,
know
cool.
what is important in Astro, like what directives you need to think about, I think most of the time, all you're thinking about is the on off switch. Do I need to load client JavaScript for this element?
Mm-hmm.
I've been in cases where I imported a button from Shad CN and I wanted it to look really nice, but it's just a form submission button. It actually doesn't need any JavaScript. So I just put the button on the
All right.
page and I don't put the client directive. And there, it's just loading the styles. It makes the button look good, but it doesn't load React because I don't need it. But if
Mm-hmm.
you decide this needs a click handler, I need to do something custom, then you can add client colon load, and that will tell that component to mount as a React element. And client load is going to be your best friend for most things. There are other directives that are very specialized. Client visible is the second one I think about, where if I'm seeing some performance issues when I load the page for the first time and it says, oh, lighthouse score of 50 because this took a while to paint. I might say,
Okay.
all right, one example might be client idle, which will delay loading of JavaScript until everything has settled on the page, and that can sometimes improve load times. Specialized, but it's a switch that you can know about. And client
Mm-hmm.
visible is if something's way far down on the page and I just don't need to load it up front. And I might put the client visible directive on there. It can occasionally cause scroll jank if you're like scrolling down and it loads like half a gigabyte of information. You do need to
Yeah.
think about that. Like, how heavy is this component? I might not be able to use this strategy. But if it works and everything looks good, that's also a lever you can pull. Those are all very nuanced use cases, though. Most of the time, you're just turning it on with client load and you call it a day. That's probably going to be what you need.
All right. All right. Cool. Cool. I had to ask that question because of my personal experience, and I think I got the perfect answer of the solution in case I come across such issue again. Cool. Cool. Um. So I think you already mentioned the kind of applications, right, where Astro shines, and you said Astro works for all kind of applications, right? But you get you guys are the team on the team, right? I've gotten to realize that okay, Astro shines on some, not really shines, but like it's really powerful when it comes to some kind of applications, right? Not to
Yep.
say it's not to say it's actually not powerful on other kind of application. You could use it for any kind of applications, and it gives you what you want. Um, and I think you mentioned mostly docs and content driven applications, right? Astro really shines in such world. Cool. Um, I just wanted to ask. So in Astro, do you guys have any special data fetching techniques library we need to know? Like, is there any techniques, or like, for example, if you're coming from Next.js, for example, you could get stuff like, okay, we have server side components, which is really new in React 14, the app router and stuff. So like, is there any special techniques that are actually just for Astro, right? I think you already mentioned directive, which is mostly for Astro and your component and stuff. So are there other techniques when working with Astro that are specific to just Astro applications? Yeah.
Yeah. And, the new Next.js app router is definitely something worth talking about, since even in their announcement post, or maybe this was on the React docs, they did say the use client directive that lets you go from this is on the server to this is on the client is Astro
Yep.
like. It's
Hmm.
I don't want to say inspired by, because someone's going to correct me and say they made an RFC 2 years before Astro was created. Whatever, we did it first.
Okay.
But they do note, like, yeah, if you're talking about that use client decorator, you can put in React. Our client directive is the exact same thing, where you're opting in to allowing that use state hook to be used here. So that is one parallel you can definitely think about. But you did mention
Okay.
data fetching, and that's definitely something that we think about as well, since Next.js has partial pre-rendering, it's got a suspense component, it's got server actions, all those things are thought about. And we do have equivalents in Astro today. One of them
Okay.
is what we're calling server islands, which is
Violence.
the same thing as partial pre-rendering, but a much simpler version, where you might have a page that's rendered at build time, like a blog post. I run build on
Okay.
my website with Astro Build, and it builds a bunch of HTML files with all my blog posts. Cool. What if I have one element on the page where I want to load comments? Comments can't be
Mm-hmm.
run at build time, since the user can literally type a comment. That can change in real time. So for that part of the page, I want that to be server rendered. But the rest of it doesn't have to be server rendered. I don't need anything for that. So with
Mm-hmm.
Astro, you can add a server directive to any component, and that will say, for this element on the page, run a fetch request on the client. Like, when you see this component, just run a fetch request, and it will turn that component into a mini endpoint that returns just the markup for that one part of the page. So you can say, this blog post is static, but for the comment section, turn that comment component into a request handler that'll just rerun anytime a user visits the page. And I can add cache headers, I can add form handling, I can do whatever I want inside of there, but I've basically created one part of the page that's going to be server rendered. And that's very similar to Next.js's partial pre-rendering and suspense in a way, because you can also add a
Mm-hmm.
fallback UI while that comment section is loading. So that's a really nice way to choose certain parts of the page that should be behind a spinner, load up asynchronously, load on request, and then the rest of the page does not need to be loaded on request. It's a nice little experimental feature that should be
Okay.
stable in the coming months.
Oh, all right. All right. Cool. 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 I will definitely check out Server Island, and yeah, definitely. Cool. 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 I think we could talk about SEO, right? Search engine optimization with Astro. I think while going through the documentation, I got to see Astro has a very high way of handling SEO, right? So we could just talk about it right now. So like, how does Astro really handle SEO, and how does it handle it compared to like other frameworks out there? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the reason Astro gets good SEO is because it's just an HTML document. There's nothing fancy going on. There's no React helmet. There's none of that.
Yeah.
There aren't really layouts. Layouts are just components. So if you wanted to set up good SEO for a page, things you're thinking about are usually going to be a bunch of meta tags in the head. And those will be like Twitter card image and Twitter card summary. And then the title and description that need to appear in Google search results. All of those need to be set for all the pages on your website. And by default, Astro just lets you pass. You can literally just create a component that has a head and a meta tag
Mm-hmm.
and everything else. So you can pass down the title, pass down the description, pass down whatever you need for each route and render those with the appropriate SEO information. And you can package those up into your own SEO component if you wanted to, and your SEO component can generate all the meta tags that you need. There's also community libraries that do this, where you can pass in title and description and image, and it will generate all the information for you. Same goes for fonts. If you wanted to optimize load times for fonts and pull them in from Google Fonts, since that's such a common pattern, I know there's a library called Astro Font that automates all of the setup, including prefetching, including the meta tags, all of that stuff done for you. So because it's easy to create your own SEO components, people have just started creating that in userland. So we can easily recommend those to people. And if you want to customize it, it's your HTML document. You can put stuff in the head. You can use JSX syntax to pass things down. It just feels
Yeah.
very natural to most people.
All right. All right. Cool. Cool. That's really, really amazing. And yeah, that's really amazing about SEO. I think I think for me, one of the things that caught my attention about SEO, not SEO, Astro, was when I got to try it out then. Um I had my style, right? I had my style on the same page. I had the my JSX, like my HTML on the same page, and that kind of took me back to the old way of writing um, vanilla websites, for example, or vanilla JavaScript, where you could just put your scripts, your style, and your HTML. And when I saw that that particular way Astro handles it, it kind of took me back to the old ways. I won't call them old ways, but like it still exists. You could still do that, but these days we really have to like make use of frameworks because most times they are like optimized and more I won't say secure, but like more optimized for rebuilding out applications on the web. Um, so what will you say about styling when it comes to Astro? So does Astro handle styling in a different way? Because if, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Astro has a plugin, right, for Tailwind where you guys handle like for Tailwind CSS, and so like how does Astro handle styling when it comes to using it? Yeah.
Yeah, I can draw parallels to frameworks like Vue or Svelte, since those were definitely inspirations early on. So when you handle styles in Astro, one option is to literally just put a style tag inside of each component. Astro is like a single
Okay.
file component setup, but it feels like JSX. So if you come from React, that'll be very familiar. The one superpower, though, is you can put a style tag and you can put a script tag, which are things you can't do in a normal React component. In Astro, you can
Correct.
just literally put those and it works. And
Yeah.
the one little bit of sauce we add is when you add a style tag, it will scope all the styles to the component that you're working in. So you can compose everything as components the way you normally would, but it will scope all the class names that you use. So if you reuse that component in different libraries or in different parts of the page, it will make sure your styles don't conflict in some unexpected way. So that's
Okay.
added. And we also do have like a full-on bundler called Vite that lets
Great.
you
Yeah.
use Tailwind. Yes, yes, which is the backbone of like Nuxt or SvelteKit or other frameworks like that. And
Cool.
that bundler lets you, well, it does so much. But the main thing is, minifying your styles, making sure repeated styles aren't present in the bundle. When it comes to Tailwind, you definitely need to like omit all the Tailwind classes you don't use and only include the ones your project actually uses to save on
Cor-
kilobytes. So we do
yeah.
that as well if you add the Tailwind plugin. You also have post CSS and SAS and other things that you can reach for if that's what you want to do. But out of the
Mm-hmm.
box, it's just scope styles. That's it. That's what Astro gives you.
all right, cool, cool. All right. So I think I could just ask right now, what are the resources out there for people that get thinking about getting started with Astro? So I think the number one resources out there is the documentation. I could all agree because the documentation is really rich with information, right? With how you could get started. But like, are there other not documentation, but resources out there for developers that are thinking to get started with Astro, or yeah, are there resources out there? Any other resources apart from the docs? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, docs are the best place to start since it also has tutorials and walkthrough guides on building projects for the first time. That will take you through all the crash course of concepts and also
Okay.
migration. But there's a ton of community content out there. I can shout out a bunch of YouTubers. Hopefully yourself. Hopefully you're trying Astro on
Yeah.
videos.
Definitely.
But yeah, we've got a bunch of different people. James Quick, he's been doing a lot of Astro content, especially
Yeah.
showcasing the new features. Chris Pennington as well. I know he
Nice.
just did a video about server islands, which is a great deep dive on that feature. He also talked about Astro Actions, which is our
Mm.
answer to server actions that are more
Okay.
robust than server actions. They're actually better.
Okay.
I'm biased because I built
Okay.
it, but it's better. So those
Amazing.
two
Yeah.
YouTubers are great. I also do content on it as well. My handle's right there if anyone
Cor-
wants to go watch those. But those
correct.
are the main things. We also have a Discord that you can go to for support. And if you go to our docs, you'll find a Discord badge at the top that you can go to. If you ever run into issues, have feedback or ideas for us, that's the place where we like to have two-way conversations.
All right. All right. So it sounds like Astro has a very large community, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
think for yeah, I think that's actually one of the success of any project out there, the community backing that particular project. And Astro has a lot of amazing people putting out content. Cool, 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 cool. Definitely in the future, I'll do put out content on Astro and get to explore with Astro too on the channel. Cool, cool, cool. Nice. So I think we really talked about some stuff about Astro, and I just wanted to ask what you just said right now about the server, the reply to server action, right? Because for me, I also tried out server action with Next.js 14, and it was quite amazing, right? Because you could just communicate, for example, with your databases. But like, can you just give us an idea, like from the Astro side, how it works? Yeah.
Yeah. And it is going to feel just as magical as server actions in Next.js. We have the very
Okay.
similar goal of you write a backend function that returns some info and you can call it from the front end. Same name, click to go to definition. You can see all the types lining up. It just works perfectly. That was
Mhm.
like the design goal and we hit it. But we added some more things on top, mainly
Hmm.
thinking about parsing inputs. You know, when you set up a server action, have you ever done it using form data or like form actions and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yes. 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 Next.js
Gotcha.
14. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we thought about with that was parsing the form data in a type safe way and bouncing requests that are invalid. Because when you're
Mm-hmm.
working with form data, you don't really want to call .get and then cast strings to unknown values and other things. Usually you have an idea of when I submit this form, it needs to have a name and an email. Those are the two fields. And I just want
Mm-hmm.
it to parse those for me. And if it doesn't parse, return bad request with some input banners that I can show error messages with. And Astro
Nice.
automated that entire process. So
Wow.
you can
Nice.
say input, name's going to be string, email's going to be string of type email. We use Zod, if you've ever heard of that validation library.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah. If you haven't heard of it, it's very simple. You can just declare this form's going to accept an object with the name
Mm-hmm.
and the email, and you can validate it very deeply, saying like minimum and maximum length, or a special regex, or anything else that you want to do. File uploads also work.
Mm-hmm.
So it automates the parsing of form data for you. And it also standardizes how you raise exceptions and other things that server actions don't do out of the box. So it does everything server actions can, but it adds a lot of best practices
More
on top so you hold it the right way.
nice. 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 Definitely. Really, 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 really nice. Cool. 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 So I think just the last question, so we can wrap up this call. Um, so what's the future of Astro? Like what should we expect? What's gonna like? I think you mentioned just a new feature which is the server island, right? So like what's happening with in the team? Like what's the new feature in new releases, in future releases, and what should we as developers look out for from the team? Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest things that are coming are well, we're stabilizing Astro Actions. It's an experimental feature right now, and we're adding some final touches to get to the finish
Okay.
line. Server Island should be stable pretty soon, and the big release is going to be the content layer. I don't want to go on
Hmm.
a tangent about all the features of that, but
No.
in like general terms, it's a way to interact with any source of content. Right now, we
Hmm.
help you with Markdown and MDX parsing, and also type
Okay.
checking front matter. Like every post needs to have a title. We do all of that for you. But we're trying to go a step further and think, well, what if your content is in Sanity? What if it's in Contentful? What if it's
Hmm.
in this separate repository over here? And you need to bridge the
Okay.
gap between the two. So we're building this more general setup that lets you import content from anywhere, glob it from your file system, do a fetch call to GitHub and cache the result, whatever you're trying to do. Just make it one little function you can call to say, get the collection of content from Sanity, all the blog posts. Check all the fields are present, give me the array, and I can render it in my app however I want to do. It's really robust. We're trying
Hmm.
to work with headless CMSs and other services that you probably like to use. So it's going to be a
Yeah.
big undertaking. And we're trying to get out like
Nice.
a nice experimental release in the coming months. So
Nice.
that should be the big one.
Nice, cool, cool, cool. Definitely looking out for that. Looking out for that. Yeah, cool, 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 cool. Yeah, so I think we've come to the end of this discussion, and yeah. So you guys should check out Astro. Definitely, I'll put the link to the Astro documentation, and also I think Ben YouTube account, and if you guys want to go follow him, he puts out content regularly. The whiteboard guy, amazing content.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you definitely go check that out, and also make sure you try out Astro because it's really amazing. Like you could listen to the conversation, and you know that there's a lot of exciting features coming in the future from the team, and you definitely need to like lock in and get to use this definitely. So thank you, Ben, for your time, and hope you have a nice one. Bye, guys.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah.